Welcome back. We're joined now by Anna Merlan, who is a senior reporter at Mother Jones and also the author of the book Republic of Lies, American Conspiracy Theorists and Their Surprising Rise to Power. Thanks so much for joining us on Washington Journal, Anna.
Thank you for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background and experience covering conspiracy theories and the people who believe in them?
Yeah, I'm a journalist and I've been covering conspiracy theories, conspiratorial communities, conspiratorial beliefs in American life pretty intensively for about the last 10 years and a little bit before that. And really looking at the ways in which people choose what to believe, how to make decisions, and how to evaluate information and how all those things impact their lives.
And then your book, The Republic of Lies, American Conspiracy Theorists and Their Rise to Power. Why do you say there's, in particular, their surprising rise to power?
Well, one of the things that the book talks about a lot is that conspiracy theories are really common on kind of all sides of the aisle in American life, right? One thing that we have seen, though, in the last 10 years is that people in positions of power in American life are promoting conspiracy theories in a way that is somewhat unusual. Previously, it was very common for people who were not in power in American society, whose political party was not represented in the presidency, for instance, people who were disenfranchised, to engage in conspiratorial thinking, to figure out who to blame for kind of the forces that have governed their lives and that feel inequitable, for instance. And so a kind of striking difference here is when people in positions of power, ultimate power, the presidency, the White House, also engage in conspiratorial thinking and allege, plots or campaigns against them.
All right. Well, let us get to some callers who have questions for Anna Merlan from Mother Jones. Let's start with Dave in Long Island, New York, on our line for Independence. Good morning, Dave.
Hey, how are you? Good morning. Great topic, great subject. I love conspiracy theories. I read a lot of them, and somebody like the Gulf of Tonkin. Hello, and so like the Gulf of Tonkin was pushing us more into Vietnam, and then you had the Iraq War, where if we remember when it first started, everyone said no one questioned it, everybody went, but now we learned later on that how much were lies that led us into that conflict. But really, when you talk about, you say you're from Mother Jones, left-wing institution, but I remember on the left, it used to be, take it for instance, Oliver Stone, hard left, very involved in the conspiracy theories. You have National Endowment for Democracy, USAID. When you talk about the deep state, and then who's talked about that a lot, Noam Chomsky, very hard left. And he had fake news was Noam Chomsky's thing. He wrote Manufacturing Consent, Necessary Illusions. That was a hard left, concept. So now, my quick point, I'm just going to go fast now, is I like one of my favorites is World War II, the Pearl Harbor. Japan came, there was, we put embargo, Japan came. They attacked Pearl Harbor, and what was sunk was all the battleships, right? Which was pretty, at that point, they were pretty, old technology. The new technology was were the aircraft carriers, which all happened to be out.
So, Dave, I understand that you follow a lot of these conspiracy theories. What was your specific question for Anna?
All right. Well, my question is now, so how we had the Neutrality Acts, 1, 2, 3. That all got kiboshed, Pearl Harbor. But now we have another war starting in Europe, and with Ukraine, and Russia's not stopping. Russia's the only thing that's going to stop Russia would be the United States military. And I'm just, I'm just curious to what you think. What's going to be the next lie to lie us into a war in Europe again? Thank you.
Sure. Great question. I can tell you're really engaged in these issues. I actually have two book recommendations for you that I think you would really enjoy. The first is a book called Real Enemies by a professor named Kathy Olmsted, and it's basically about conspiracy theories between World War I and 9/11. And one of the things that you're pointing to is a really persistent anxiety in American life, this fear and suspicion that U.S. officials are using false claims to lull the populace into believing in a justification for war. And there was a lot of anxiety, as you point out, about our entry into World War II following Pearl Harbor. This recurs kind of over and over again, which I think can be really helpful in understanding why these ideas come up so much. So many conspiracy theories, as you're kind of pointing to, are the same basic elements that are grafted onto new ideas, new concerns. The other book that I would really recommend is called Doppelganger. It's by a woman named Naomi Klein, and it's essentially about the ways that some of these debates kind of mirror each other on the right and left, and the different ways that those ideas are expressed in those spaces. So I don't know what the next war obviously is going to be, but I can tell you that the concerns you're expressing are old. In some cases they're well-founded, and I think often our best guide and our best teacher when it comes to these things is history, is looking at how these issues have been discussed in the past. It can also just be really revealing to realize how many conversations we've been having essentially in the same way in this country for the last 100 years. So yeah, thank you for that.
And Dave also mentioned this idea that sometimes things that are called conspiracy theories are later found out to be well-founded or true.
Right. Yes, yeah, and that's absolutely that should be a central concern for journalists, especially academics, people engaged in sort of writing what we would call the first draft of history, is not dismissing ideas as conspiracy theories too soon. And it's something that we all have to be really careful about, especially because everyone has their own kind of innate biases about what information or sources of information they consider to be reliable, credible, so-called neutral. And so, yeah, I think that this is a really important point. I suspect that somebody will call in to make a claim which is not true, which is the idea that the term conspiracy theory was created by the CIA. That is not the case. There are many recurrences of the term conspiracy theory from, before the CIA was created. But a lot of times people who believe in, let's say, contested or alternative ideas will object to the term conspiracy theory being applied to those ideas kind of without due process. And that is a fair concern. And it is important not to use language that sort of dismisses these ideas out of hand without engaging with them in a fair way. So that's absolutely true. And it's something for people like me to think about in how we write about these issues.
John is in Florence, Massachusetts, on our line for independence. Good morning, John.
Hello, yes. Mother Jones is a left-wing newspaper, and I haven't ever seen them write anything good about any Republican ever or President Trump. They just push one side of a story. I'm just curious, you guys said that the lab theory was a conspiracy theory proven true. You said that Trump being with the Russians was a conspiracy theory that you guys pushed that's been proven untrue. And then you made it sound like all the information that's just been released about Obama and Hillary Clinton and Bremer and that CIA head and the FBI Comey, all those guys, they conspired. I mean, it's released. We have the information, and you're still trying to say it's a conspiracy theory.
John? Oh, looks like we've lost him, but if you want to respond to some of those points that John raised.
Oh, yeah, I think that these are really important points. So first of all, the lab leak theory is not conclusively proven true. That is still very much contested information, but he's absolutely correct that many people in positions of power are claiming that COVID was created in a lab. That is an ongoing debate. You can really read some really great stuff about that debate in less partisan sources. For instance, the journal Nature. I would recommend that. And then the second thing, that he was pointing to is this claim that has emerged from the Trump administration and Republican circles, claiming that Donald Trump's supposed support from the Russian government was a hoax created by Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. This is a claim that the Trump administration has started making in the last couple of weeks. They have threatened to refer people like Hillary Clinton and President Obama and other former Biden and Obama officials for prosecution, and that is very much an ongoing thing right now. One thing I think might be helpful here is to read the actual reports that they are sort of basing this claim on, and to realize that in many cases, these reports say the exact opposite sometimes of what President Trump is claiming. So what we do know, for instance, about, Russian interference in the 2016 election, for instance, is that the Russian government, for reasons of their own making, favored Donald Trump over Hillary Clinton in that election. Did they impact voting? We don't know. Did they, tamper with voting? No, there's no evidence that they did that. At the same time, this claim that the entire story was cooked up by Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, the deep state, those claims have not been proven true. And in fact, a lot of the intelligence reports that are being referred to now in this current discussion say the exact opposite. Our intelligence community determined long ago that there was reason to believe that the Russian government was interested in Donald Trump being elected, not because he's a Manchurian candidate or a Russian puppet or any of these more out there claims being made, but just because they decided it would benefit them politically, and there's really interesting studies to be made specifically about the Russian state disinformation apparatus because it's pretty sophisticated, but it's not the only one. It tends to get a lot of attention. There is, for instance, really interesting studies of state disinformation apparatuses under former Filipino leader Rodrigo Duterte, under, for instance, like the Orban government. There's all kinds of other ways that we can talk about state-backed disinformation that don't have anything to do with the United States and might be interesting for your caller to look at to sort of think more broadly about how these ideas play out.
Brenda is in Michigan on our line for Democrats. Good morning, Brenda.
Yes, good morning. You're doing a great job. There's a lot of distractions going on, but the have and the have
Brenda,
not.
make sure you've turned down the volume on your TV, and then you can go ahead with your question for Anna Merlan of Mother Jones. Go ahead, Brenda.
The have and the have not. And we're being destroyed from the White House on down. And people have voted. It was more than just the price of food. They voted for Trump. He's destroying our democracy. He's doing what he wants. I don't know why somebody doesn't stop him. It's a war against the have and the have-nots here in the United States. And what's going on, starving those people in Israel and Gaza, is just mind-boggling. That leader should be put under the jail. I just don't know. It's so sad what's going on. We're just being destroyed. And who's going to pay for this ballroom? The taxpayers. We don't need a ballroom. We don't need to have a ballroom in the White House. That place is for business, not a ballroom. Pleasure. Thank you.
I don't know if you wanted to respond to any of those points, Anna?
Yeah. Well, no, I'm thinking a lot about that. I mean, one of the sort of most primary concerns in American life is about this issue that the caller was talking about, the haves versus the have-nots. And a lot of times in American history, as I said, the people who engage in conspiratorial thinking are the have-nots, or people who are disadvantaged by our society. At the same time, a lot of what the caller was pointing to is genuine and real distress over what we're seeing right now with the dismantling of large parts of the American government and the federal system. I wrote a piece a few months ago about knowledge loss in the federal government, about all the things that we used to study and track and research and fund, scientifically, that we no longer do, all the ways in which we are less informed about the world around us because of these sort of devastating budget cuts to the federal government. So, some of these concerns are very real and are things that are going to impact us and our system and in some cases our health and safety for a really long time. So yeah, I understand why the caller feels so frustrated.
Karen is in Alabaster, Alabama on our line for Republicans. Good morning, Karen.
Hey, good morning. So I actually was going to bring up the Trump is a Russian asset and who started all that. And it was Hillary Clinton. And you keep talking about how Trump is posting all these things. It's not President Trump. He's saying it, but Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, just released a bunch of documentation, not everything, a lot of it's redacted, saying that's exactly what they did. Exactly what they did. So it's not conspiracy, it's a fact.
Right. So one thing I would definitely urge you to do is to read some independent analyses of what the Trump administration is saying about the material that they are releasing. In a lot of cases, earlier intelligence reports about these same documents directly disagree with the Trump administration's current claims that these documents prove that President Obama or Hillary Clinton, decided to cook up this so-called Russiagate scandal to doom Donald Trump's presidency. The other thing that I think might be worth looking at is why specifically the Trump administration has chosen sort of right now to engage in this debate over the 2016 elections. There are many people, including people on the right, as you might be aware, who feel like this is meant to be a distraction from the ongoing controversy over the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. So I don't dispute your outrage over what you see as the sort of manufacturing of a controversy, and I would never tell you not to be upset about that, but I would definitely encourage you to read as much as you can about what sort of independent experts and even former members of the intelligence community are saying about these specific documents that are currently being released and touted by the Trump administration as being very damning. And I guess I would also watch to see what happens with these supposed investigations and criminal prosecutions. As you probably have noticed, as a lot of folks on the MAGA side have been talking about recently, the Trump administration sometimes makes promises of disclosure, of criminal prosecution, of some other kind of explosive action that then does not happen. So I would say that if you are angry about this issue, if you're animated by this issue, please keep paying attention to it, see what happens, see where this goes. I think that's a great practice for all of us.
William is in Mableton, Georgia, on our line for Democrats. Good morning, William.
Yes, good morning. I'm a little perplexed as to how you think both political parties subscribe to conspiracy theories equally. Pretty much everything that comes from the right is a conspiracy theory. From Obama being a Muslim, not being born in America. When we were still at war in Afghanistan and Iraq, we had troops that went to Texas to do training. The governor of Texas wanted to be reassured that they weren't going to be invaded by the troops. That came from the governor of Texas. During Trump first term, they had coined a term, alternative facts. And most Republicans only watch one or two networks because they hear what they want to hear. I can't think of anything that a Democrat or any group that I've ever heard on the left-leaning side, no conspiracy theories. Everything about Trump is true, from defrauding people, from business to the university, to stealing from the vets, to grabbing women and he found guilty of sexual assault, tried to overthrow an election. There is no room for conspiracy theories from the left, because everything about the Republicans is too much real life to have to make things up.
Yeah, that caller makes a number of really, really good points. And I think what you're seeing is that conspiracy theories on the right, because the right has been in power for, so long in various forms, tend to be more public and more disruptive. And as the caller correctly pointed out, Donald Trump's first entry into the American political debate was over this false and frankly racist claim that that President Obama was not born in the United States and was a Muslim, which was meant to be a damning claim of some kind. So the caller is absolutely right that the conspiracy theories and false ideas pushed on the right tend to get a lot more attention, a lot more coverage, especially right now when the president is a Republican and sort of every branch of government is controlled by the right. What we do see, though, kind of more broadly in American history is that the beliefs that powerful groups of people are working in secret against the common good do occur on both the right and left. They tend to be different. The conspiracy theories that those groups hold tend to be different. For instance, it is probably more common on the left than on the right to believe that consequential secrets about, for instance, how GMOs impact our health are being hidden from us, stuff like that. Anti-vaccine beliefs, which are often rooted in conspiracy theories, tend to be kind of equally common on the right and the left. The idea, as I've pointed to previously, that Donald Trump is not just, favored by the Russian government, but is actually like a Russian asset, a Manchurian candidate. That's obviously a more left-leaning idea. But the caller is making an incredibly important point, which is that the conspiracy theories promoted by the right, and particularly the people in power right now, get so much more oxygen, so much more air, and they also have a greater chance of impacting people's lives in a much more direct way. Somebody, as I have made the point over and over in my work, somebody in a position of power promoting a conspiracy theory can make it go a lot further than somebody who might believe in a conspiracy theory to explain a lack of power or disenfranchisement in their own lives. That is absolutely true, and it's a great point.
Linda is in Maine on our line for Independence. Good morning, Linda.
Yes, my concern is with the judicial system and the conspiracy theories, possibly contaminating jury pools. Defense attorneys are tapping into these conspiracy biases. And two examples of this is one case recently in Massachusetts that created a mob based on conspiracies, and also the case pending on the murder of the United Healthcare CEO. Thank you.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I don't know a lot, and I don't know if we have a lot of kind of studies about whether conspiratorial thinking impacts juries or the application of the justice system. But again, this does point to the larger point that, concerns about conspiratorial thinking impact kind of the right and left alike. And we do have examples, not so much in the United States, but in other countries, about misinformation leading to mob violence. There were a series of reports about kind of false rumors spreading on WhatsApp in, I believe, India and a couple of other places that did lead directly to kind of like vigilante justice and mob violence in the places where those spread. So I think the broader concern here, which is about how conspiratorial thinking or, stigmatized views of other people can impact things like the justice system, things like how people are treated in the eyes of the law. I think that's, that's a legitimate concern, if not something that I know a ton about.
Carrie is in Milwaukee, Wisconsin on our line for Republicans. Good morning, Carrie.
Good morning. First of all, let me say that comment, I'm calling on the Republican line, but Anna or somebody pointed out in the last couple of minutes about, Trump saying that Obama wasn't a U.S. citizen or wasn't born here or whatever. I mean, totally, of course, that's totally ridiculous. It really is unacceptable, but, that's par for the course. I mean, politicians have been lying and promoting conspiracies on both sides I'm 63 years old, and for like 40 years that I'm aware of, Anyhow, I first tuned in, Anna, and I got distracted because I heard you, Anna, say that, yeah, we shouldn't be so quick to dismiss all conspiracy theories just because they sound ridiculous or whatever. And I thought, oh, this sounds interesting. But then you lost some credibility with me. However, you redeemed yourself in a call a few minutes ago when you kind of corrected that gentleman who implied that all the conspiracy theories were promoted by the right and not by the left. And so you did, correct him and say that and give examples of conspiracy theories on both sides. But what disturbed me and why you temporarily at least lost some of my credibility is when a woman called in and went on and on about, well, not terribly on and on, but what's been very heavily promoted by the left, and that is that, Trump is a threat to democracy, and anybody who believes in some of his policies and stuff like that are, evil, and Nazis and fascism is coming and everything. And I fully expected you either to take the easy way out and not answer it at all, but instead you kind of backed up that person and said, yeah, those are really valid claims, instead of saying something which I would hope to be such as, well, I understand how you feel that way. A lot of people do, but understand that may also be part of a conspiracy theory, promoted by the left to the extremes on both ends are so ridiculous at this point. I just wish that moderate Republicans and moderate Democrats could come together and elect somebody normal. Thank you very much.
So,
I'll
Carrie,
take your answers off here.
Carrie, before we let you go, though, if I understand you correctly, there were several moments in the conversation where you agreed with what Anna said and established her as credible in those moments, but in the moments that you disagreed, she lost credibility with you. And I'm asking this because this kind of relates to Anna's point earlier about how we determine credibility with people. And I wonder if you could, explain that a bit more about how you're making those assessments.
Absolutely. As I've been retired, I've kind of become a news junkie and obsessed, and I've always had an intense interest in world politics and economics. So I spend a ridiculous amount of time. I can't really stomach watching, I never could stomach watching MSNBC, except for maybe some comic relief, but I certainly can no longer stomach watching Fox News at all. Every now and again I can watch CNN during the day when it's more the news shows versus the evening shows. As people need to understand, the evening shows are not news shows. They are basically entertainment shows, and the more extreme they are, the higher their ratings.
So I am going to just pause you because I think we've got your idea, and I do want to give Anna a chance to respond. And thank you, Carrie, for adding that clarification about how you're consuming news. Anna, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, well, I'm so glad that I'm at least intermittently credible to the caller. Thank you, and thank you for listening with an open mind. I think that's really impressive. It sounds like you're somebody who's following current events very closely and is feeling at least somewhat frustrated with kind of every side of the aisle, which I think is, again, something that a lot of Americans can relate to. Certainly, I think the idea that people on the left just believe... Sorry, let me phrase this a different way. We know from public polling that there is a pretty broad-based dissatisfaction, especially on the left, with some of President Trump's policies. This is kind of totally apart from the conversation that we're having about conspiratorial thinking, right? There is a dissatisfaction with dismantling large portions of the federal government, with essentially trying to sunset things like the education department, with the dismantling of large aspects of the public health system, of putting people in place like Elon Musk and Doge, who were, I think you would agree, unelected bureaucrats who were pursuing an agenda that was not necessarily the agenda that even President Trump's supporters necessarily voted for, right? I do agree with you that it is absolutely wrong to dismiss all of President Trump's supporters as Nazis, fascists, what have you. However, I do want to share something with you about specifically the sort of far-right support for Donald Trump, which is wavering a little bit right now for a bunch of reasons. Years ago, during the 2016 elections, I interviewed a white supremacist, somebody who was the leader of a white supremacist group, and I'm not going to use his name because it would make him happy. And he told me that he and his group were supporting Donald Trump not because they believed Donald Trump was a fascist, but because they believed that Donald Trump could perhaps help them pursue some of their goals and agendas. But this person was also very much hoping that when people on the right, the MAGA base, became disaffected with Donald Trump, as they inevitably would, because people tend to not follow politicians forever, he was hoping that when the MAGA base became disaffected with MAGA, with the right, they would become fascists instead. That they would not instead go back towards the middle or the more moderate agenda, that they would be pushed even further to the right, even further towards, for instance, white supremacist and fascist and neo-Nazi ideas that he was very much hoping to promote. So there is a real danger here that we can look at in how bad actors, malicious actors, extremists in the true sense of the word, are hoping to manipulate and benefit from our political discourse and push people who are disaffected with the political process and the establishment further into the arms of really, really, really negative, stigmatizing ideas that can do a lot of harm to society. So I don't know, I hope you'll consider that. But thank you for paying attention to the news primarily. That is so important. It is so admirable. A lot of people are tuning out right now. So thank you for trying to stay engaged.
And thank you, Anna Merlan, who's a senior reporter at Mother Jones and the author of Republic of Lies, American Conspiracy Theorists and Their Surprising Rise to Power. Anna, thank you for your time and expertise this morning.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks to all the callers for their great questions.